What's up, everybody?
Welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 226. And boy, do we have a very interesting case to go over with you guys today. Really looking forward to talking about this one.
This is a case unlike really any others out there.
Yeah, you never know. There's
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I can't think of any off the top of my head that we have covered that is similar to this case.
I don't think so. I've never heard of anything like this before. This one is truly just has some major twists to it.
It does.
We're going to be covering the case of G.I. Joe Gliniewicz, who was a police hero for many, many years, served in the military, and things in his life, due to his actions, started kind of going down a different road that did not end well.
Yes.
That's really all I can say without giving away sort of what happens. But it's a wild case for sure.
Yeah, buckle in. There's a lot of twists here. But first, we wanted to give you guys a couple announcements. First of all, we wanted to give back this holiday season. So we decided that we are going to be matching all donations that you guys make to National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the next, it's like a month and a half that we have, basically until the end of the year. So if you would like to be part of that, we have a link in our description box and in our show notes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you use that link, we can track your donation and we will be matching it. So yeah, we're really excited. We've already raised over 50,000. I think we're close to 60 now through merch and small business collabs. So thank you to everyone who has participated in that. We are really hoping to make a big difference for NCMEC this year.
We feel really good about supporting NCMEC because through the cases that we cover on the show, oftentimes NCMEC is often involved in those cases, and we just know how important the work that they do is, and they always need more. They need more resources to put towards other cases out there. So it's such an important cause to support, and we hope that you'll join us in donating to NCMEC. Again, we're going to match dollar for dollar. So at the end of the year, we'll tally it all up, and we'll make a donation to match what all of you out there donate to this amazing organization.
Also, we still have NCMEC charity merch available at milehighermerch.com. And now is a great time to hop on over and check all that stuff out, because almost everything on milehighermerch.com is going to be 25% off for Black Friday. We are so excited. I'm actually wearing one of our Mile Higher sweatshirts right now. This one is one of my favorites. It is so warm and cozy. And check out the back. It's one of the coolest designs I think we've ever done.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you for modeling, Kendall.
You're welcome.
If you want to see the designs in more detail, so that you can actually see which one you'd like, again, that's milehighermerch.com.
We'll overlay a picture too.
Okay.
But yeah, now is a great time to pick up one of those charity items and also get yourself some of the rest of the merch for 25% off.
Just a note, charity items are not on sale.
Yes,
Thank
correct.
you for specifying that. Yeah.
Yep, and there's no code needed. milehighermerch.com. Also,
real quick, once these are gone, they're gone. We're not restocking. I know we have restocked in the past. We are not doing that with this collection. So once stuff is gone, that's it.
And you definitely want to head there as soon as possible, because it's quite possible sizes and certain items are going to sell out at the beginning of the sale. So hop on it, ladies and gents. Also, we just want to thank today's sponsors. We have Storyworth, who is a new sponsor, Thrive Market, Rocket Money. I believe they're also a new sponsor.
Yeah, relatively new.
Simply Save and Masterclass, new sponsor. Love Masterclass. Thank you so much to our sponsors. And are you ready to just get into it here, Josh?
I am. This case, I feel a bit of a personal connection to this one, which I'll tell you about here very shortly. But this case is a very tragic case. I think I don't want that to get lost in all of this, because at the end of the day, a family, lost a father, a husband, in a very tragic way. So I just want to point that out. But this case definitely is probably one that you have never heard of before.
Most likely. I'm surprised too. It doesn't have as much coverage as you would think, because it's really just a wild story.
It is. So we're going to start with looking at the life of Charles Joseph Gliniewicz, which this whole case basically centers on.
So Charles Joseph Gliniewicz was born on August 25th, 1963 in Libertyville, Illinois, and he went by Joe for short. Growing up, Joe was known as a funny, friendly guy with a nice smile, and he was a military and police guy from the start. For high school, he attended Marmion Academy, an all-boys Catholic residential high school that was also a military school at the time. And after 2 years there, he transferred and graduated from Antioch Community College in 1981. After he graduated from high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. And during his career, Joe worked hard, and he became a decorated soldier. He stayed there for about 4 years before he joined the Army Reserves and decided to become a police officer.
Which is a pretty common thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of police officers out there that are in the Army Reserves or just different reserves in the armed forces because, the two really tie together really well. And a lot of times police departments have, they build it in so that if you do get called to go do something for the military, that your job is, safe when you come back.
Still there for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And obviously some of the experience and training you get in the military to the police force definitely crosses over. And so it's a very natural career path. There's definitely tons and tons of veterans in law enforcement for that very reason.
So Joe got a job as a police officer with the Fox Lake Police Department in 1985, and he truly loved his job as a police officer, and he loved to give back to his community. In fact, he was known as a man who was dedicated to his service. And Joe served in many different roles when he worked in the department. He worked as a canine officer, a field training officer, and even a member of the regional SWAT team. But the work he was most proud of was his work with the local youth. In 1987, Joe was actually made the head of the Fox Lake Youth Explorers Post. And the Police Explorers program, Josh can tell us a little bit more about that because he was actually in it. But it is for youth ages 14 to 21 who want to explore a career in law enforcement. So they sort of shadow and work directly with local police officers.
Yeah, so I can explain this from firsthand experience, actually. For those that didn't know, before I actually met Kendall, I was actually on a direct path to be a police officer for the Aurora Police Department here in the Denver metro area. And in high school, our SRO officers, so school resource officers here I think in most states, they have police officers at the high schools, but they talked to me about joining this Explorers post. And I was very interested in law enforcement, and I'd actually gone on a couple ride-alongs, just citizen ride-alongs with some different departments. And they're like, this is really cool because, as a high schooler, you can come in and basically start a police academy it's kind of like a cadet program. So you come in and, they do a background check, they interview you, and then basically they put you through a academy, which obviously, since I'm in high school, I can't go every day. So it was on the weekends. So for, probably like 3 or 4 months straight, every Saturday I'd be at the police department basically doing an academy. And there's some pictures of me actually here in uniform, and there's a couple of pictures from academy, and there's the last picture there is me working an air show as a police explorer. So basically you're not a police officer, but you get access to the police department, which is really cool. I had a badge. I could actually go in and out of the police departments through the secure entrances. I got to go in the evidence room. I got to go to the jails. I got to go on all kinds of ride-alongs. I have tons of crazy stories, but it's really cool because it gives you an inside look at what it means to be a police officer. Is this something you really want to do? And they train you very much the same way that they train real police officers. So that the hope is that, they bring the youth into this program and you spend 5 or 6 years in this program. And then what's cool is that if you decide that you want to actually become a police officer, they give you something called preference points. So if I were to apply for the Aurora Police Department after being in this program, I'd get preference points over other candidates. So the likeliness of me actually getting to become an actual police officer would have been, super, super high. And I was the top of my class too. So don't want to brag, but I was there's one of the pictures I'll have to put in here is me giving a speech at our graduation. So there's like graduation, you give a speech and you learn all these different things. And so it's a really cool program, honestly. Like I had a really good experience in it.
Yeah, you were so
I was super into it, man. I was like, I told her, I was like, I'm going to be in the gang unit. I'm going to go work the streets on, in the middle of the night, taking down gang members and stuff. And it's funny though, looking back, because I think being young as much as you do get exposed to some of that stuff, like it's obviously much different doing it day in, day out. And
to be in it versus
the danger aspect of it never really hit me until after years later, where I was like, damn, like I was potentially in a lot of danger situations just on those ride-alongs that I went on, but to imagine putting myself in harm's way for oftentimes just people that don't want to go back to prison is honestly what most officer involved shootings end up being, is like people that have warrants don't want to go back to prison and they're willing to fucking take your life.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of respect for police officers. Obviously, I think over the course of the show, you know, we've definitely been pretty hard on them at times because there are bad apples, but
yeah, a lot of bad apples. A lot of good apples, but yeah, a lot of bad ones.
Well, and I think a lot of it is like the culture of police departments. It's very much, and even in my experience with officers, it's very much kind of a club, and there is this like brothers in blue sort of attitude and protect each other at all costs. And sometimes that means covering up potentially really dangerous things and you know, things they do to other people that a police officer should never do. You swear an oath to serve and protect the public at all costs, and some officers just don't take that seriously. But
yeah,
I definitely met a lot of good ones in there. There's definitely some good ones, some good skills, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time in there. So Joe was basically the Explore Post advisor. He ran the whole post. He did the training. So we would have real officers that would conduct the trainings for us. It was really cool though. You got to wear kind of a police uniform. You learn all the radio stuff. You learn the arrest techniques.
I used to think it was so hot when you would wear your uniform.
I know. I remember there was a 4th of July where the city of Aurora did a fireworks show, and I was out there. And so the Explorers, they'd use you for like community service stuff, which is kind of cool. You'd be in the community, and I was running like traffic detail for like parking and things like that. And I remember coming over to your house after, and I was like wearing my gear and stuff, and you're like, ooh. Man in a uniform.
Yeah, you almost got your first kiss that night. Could have. Didn't go for it.
Damn. Well, good thing it ended up in my favor though, huh?
Yeah, you look so cute in these.
I know, I'm so young. So I'm like 17 years old in these pictures.
Right around the time we met.
Yep.
How old do you have to be to join this?
14.
14?
Yeah.
You can start really young.
Basically, freshman year of high school, you can join, and then you can be through it all the way till 21. Which is 21's the age that you have to be to become an actual police officer.
How old do you have to be to do a ride along though? It's got to be a little older.
I think with parent permission, it's like 14 or 15.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I did some ride alongs that were pretty crazy, and I saw some stuff for sure. But I think it's a good way to, I think anything with any career field, I think it's great when you can get into a program and experience what your career is going to end up being like. So you can actually see firsthand people who do it professionally, what it's like, and also really find out if it's for you.
Yeah.
And ultimately I came to the decision that it just, I felt like I was capable of doing more and other things, and just obviously my relationship was very important, and it was just, you know, it wasn't the right fit, I think is the right word. But yeah, the Explorers program is a really cool program. I actually was just looking back at like the some of the old pictures, and there's a buddy of mine who I graduated with who's now an officer. He's out patrolling and stuff, which is, it's just kind of cool to see that, you know, some people end up doing that. A lot of people don't end up doing law enforcement after going through the program, but
I did a ride along once.
You did. And you said it was the most boring experience.
Yeah, not only was it boring, but I had a super racist cop and his racist buddy.
Ew.
And they were horrible. They were sexist, racist, everything, you name it. Terrible.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
There's good ones and bad ones out there.
Someone better probably would have enjoyed it a lot more, because it sounded cool. I was so excited for it. I did it through my law class.
I'm surprised because usually the way that those ride-alongs work is you put in the application, and then basically the sergeant for, you know, that particular shift decides which officer you ride with. And a lot of times they try to put you with their, you know, their best officer, so to speak. So it's interesting that you end up getting.
I had a terrible guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He brought us to the projects, and he started just saying horrific things about all the people that lived there. It was just,
that's so disappointing.
It was really bad. I remember being so bummed out. I should have.
Did you report him?
I should have reported him.
That's
no,
horrible.
I didn't. I know, it was horrible. Very sad. Anyway.
back to Joe.
Yes.
So Joe was the head of the Explore Post, and he basically basically ran it from the beginning and made it how he wanted it to be. So as we go along, I'll point out some of the differences between his Explorer post versus mine and some of the others out there, because he did things a little bit differently and he took this kind of to the next level from what it's actually supposed to be. I don't know about you, but I have a major problem with setting up subscriptions, then forgetting about them, only to realize months, sometimes even years later, that I'm still paying for that subscription from a long time ago. Well, that is a thing of the past now, because I've found Rocket Money, which is formerly known as Truebill. So what's cool about the Rocket Money app is that it shows you all of your subscriptions in one place, and then it cancels for you whatever you don't want anymore, which is super helpful, because I think that's one thing many of us avoid looking at our subscriptions, because a lot of times it's a pain in the ass to actually cancel them. But with Rocket Money, they do it for you. Rocket Money can also find subscriptions you didn't know you were paying for. You may even find out that you've been double charged for a subscription, which nothing makes you more mad than being double charged, right? To cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel, and Rocket Money takes care of the rest. It's a great app for managing your expenses as well. It's a great app for managing bills, all that good stuff. You can do it all with Rocket Money. So get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Seriously, could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/milehigher.
So for all of his hard work with the Explorer's Post, Joe received all sorts of rewards and honors, and he led training events for explorers like the Explorer SWAT course, the Sniper course, and the Explorer Basic Training Academy.
One thing I wanted to point out, and you'll see this in lots of the pictures and videos of Joe with his explorers, is they are all wearing military uniforms. They're not wearing police uniforms. Police don't wear combat boots and military camouflage pants and jackets. That to me right away was like, So there's kind of this stigma in the police, like some guys from the military, like G.I. Joe here, they try to translate this military experience to being a police officer, and really you're working with civilians, not working with other soldiers. So some guys from the military wear combat boots and try to bring that like really aggressive, like I'm this badass soldier to, being a police officer. And that's really not what the actual police departments want you to do. That's not a lot of police departments don't even let you wear combat boots and military style uniforms and things like that. So it's interesting that he made his explorers basically look like they're training to join the army, as opposed to a police force for a small town. Yeah. It just that to me was a little much. Yeah.
Joe mentored many young adults in the area, and they looked up to him greatly. He was an influential figure in many of their lives. And one former youth explorer even said that Joe became a mentor and almost a father figure to hundreds of kids throughout the years. And 70% of the kids actually joined the police force or the military after training with Joe.
That's really high.
Yeah.
That's wow.
And everyone in the community knew Joe. I mean, he was described as kind of a local celebrity almost. And everyone had some sort of interaction with Joe over the years or can remember him. It seems like a lot of people have stories. And he was easy to spot because he actually drove around in a camo truck, a big camo truck. What is that, raised?
Yeah, a lifted camo truck, yeah.
Yeah, so he stood out, and he was nicknamed G.I. Joe from his previous military service and his strong army guy looks. But he was still friendly and really kind to others, and he always was ready to lend a helping hand in his community. And as the years went on, Joe was promoted to sergeant, and later on, he was promoted to a lieutenant.
Which is a pretty high rank within a police department.
Mm-hmm. He also earned multiple police medals, including Medal of Valor. So Joe was really a hero in this community. In 1989, Joe married a woman named Melody Ressiter. They had 4 sons, Joseph, Donald, or DJ for short, Jeffrey, and David. And everyone knew him as a great father and husband who loved his family dearly. Melody actually helped Joe out with the Explorers program a lot. She was sort of a mentor to the female explorers. His brother Michael became a lieutenant in the Antioch Fire Department, and his son DJ joined the Army as well. Joe officially left the Army Reserves in 2007, but during his 26 years of service, He earned at least 9 medals and badges for his hard work, courage, and dedication. He also earned a bachelor's and master's degree from Kaplan University. And in the future, he hoped to start a doctoral program at Capella University. Joe was set out to retire at the end of September 2015 after 30 years of police service.
So now let's fast forward to the summer of 2015, because that's where some very, very major events happened. And it's important that we go back and give some context as well as to what the U.S. was like politically and culturally speaking. So during 2015, you'll probably remember that there was huge protests against police violence all over the country. The protests were a response to the deaths of multiple Black Americans while in police custody, including Eric Harris, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, and unfortunately, many others. These demonstrations were associated with the Black Lives Matter movement, which had been growing in the United States. The movement began in the U.S. after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in 2013, and in 2014, it became the rallying cry of famous demonstrations across the country, especially the Ferguson protests after the police shooting of Michael Brown. So as we all remember, these protests in 2014 really divided the country, and political tensions continued to rise into 2015 and beyond. Now that people were protesting against police brutality so heavily, the public's outlook towards cops definitely shifted to a much less favorable position. And there was a huge backlash from people who thought the protests were anti-police. So by this point, the whole reactionary Blue Lives Matter or Police Lives Matter movement had cropped up, and many people believed that the police were now under attack in America due to the Black Lives Matter movement. And there was a growing belief that it wasn't safe to be a cop anymore. The media was also sort of spreading this idea as well. But the idea that there was now a war on cops in America definitely became more popular after the events of September 1st, 2015, which takes us to that Tuesday morning, which this morning was supposed to be like any other for Joe Gliniewicz. He stopped at a convenience store to buy cigarettes in the morning, just like he always did before starting his patrol shift. Then Joe made his way over to an abandoned cement plant off of Honing Road and sat there for about a half hour. And then at 7:52 a.m., he reported to dispatch that he saw 2 white men and a black man that he deemed suspicious at the cement plant. Dispatch asked Joe if he needed backup at that point, but Joe said no. And that was the only description of the suspects that Joe gave. Obviously, this is a very vague description with no other identifiable characteristics like possible age, build, height, or hairstyle. Then 3 minutes later, Joe reported that he was going to head to the nearby swampy area and approach the men. Dispatch asked if he needed a second unit, and Joe responded, "Okay, start sending somebody my way." Dispatch then ordered for another unit to head towards Joe's location. At 7:57 a.m., Joe radioed in his location again and said the suspects were now running towards the swamp. At 8 a.m., the backup unit arrived at Joe's location, and the dispatcher and other units radioed Joe multiple times asking for a status. And this is when they got no response. So the second unit then called in for more backup, and they started looking for Joe, because obviously when Joe's not replying with his status, that's a major red flag to every other officer that he could potentially be in danger. They confirmed to dispatch that they made no contact with Joe, and they tried his cell phone even, and there was no answer. Plus, there wasn't a trail of footsteps to follow, so the officers walked deeper into the marshy woods looking for more clues. And that's when the officers heard the sound of a lone gunshot. They didn't hear signs of a struggle or anyone running, but obviously when you hear a gunshot, as a police officer, you draw your weapon and you start going towards the sound. And then that's when the officers discovered something horrible. At 8:18 a.m., one of the units radioed in, "Officer down." To give you guys some better perspective on this very moment, I'm going to go ahead and play some of the radio traffic between dispatch and those officers.
I'm off the gravel road that runs.
So this is Joe.
Cement plant and Honing Road.
Goes in saying he is pursuing 3 suspicious individuals.
10-4, the second unit. Yeah, go ahead, start, buddy. 6740, your status. Fox Lake Unit 6740, checking your status. Fox Lake Units on Honing, checking status on 6740. We don't have him right now, we're looking for him. Foxcom from CENTCOM, have you made contact with your officer? CENTCOM, that's negative. 792 on location. Try him on his cell phone, please.
Send everybody you possibly can. Officer is down.
Officer down.
So that's when those officers that were looking for Joe found Lieutenant Joe Gliniewicz lying face down on the ground. He'd been shot dead. His face was scraped up and there was bruising to his head. The police told dispatch to spread the word that there were 3 armed and dangerous suspects on the loose. And obviously, when an officer is killed like this, everybody is out looking for the suspects. I mean, they literally called the next town over. They get as much resources as possible to try and hunt down these killers. So all law enforcement officers from the nearby departments were then mobilized. The SWAT team was called in, and more than 400 police officers combed through the woods where Joe's body was found.
And it was hot and super humid. So some of the officers were even passing out during this time. I mean, they're walking through swampy areas. Like, it's the middle of the day. It's not good. But once it was dark, they used helicopters with thermal seeking devices to try and make sure there was no one in the area. And they searched for a total of 14 hours, but found nothing.
Which at this point, you're wondering how, they're in this area that is an abandoned cement plant. It's marshy. Yeah, there's some places to hide, but how did 3 guys virtually just vanish from this area so quickly? Because again, officers got there and heard the gunshot. Yeah. So if that's the case, then those guys,
they've got to be close.
Should have been caught. They would have been caught, right? You would think, at least.
You would think.
So the area immediately flew into a frenzy as the police looked for the men. Schools even went on lockdown. Community members panicked and commuter trains stopped running. The schools in the area actually canceled classes the day after Joe was killed, while the manhunt was still continuing. People even barricaded themselves in their houses because, again, there's a cop killer or multiple cop killers on the loose. Joe's service weapon, so the handgun that he carried, was not found for an hour, even though it was sitting only a few feet from his body. It was like 3 feet away. It was kind of, again, this is kind of a woodsy area, tall grass, things like that. So maybe that's why it was kind of hard to find. But also the other items that he carried on a service belt, like his radio, mace, and taser, were also found scattered in the marshy area near where his body was found.
Which to me, I'm like, if you just killed someone, why would you not take those items with you?
Right.
And the gun. They're just going to leave everything scattered there. Like, and you're literally by a swamp, throw that into the swamp.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
But in the moment, law enforcement is seeing things one way, right? They're seeing that, because it's not out of the realm of possibility that somebody in a quick, sort of confrontation, didn't see his gun, or maybe the gun flew off of him. I mean, at this point, they don't know, what gun killed him. So it's possible that maybe Joe got shot, and why would they take the gun if the killer never used his gun? Obviously there's the thought that maybe there was a tussle and he, sometimes suspects grab for the officer's weapon. But in this case, I think it was just like, it seemed like based on where his items were that there was potentially a struggle. And so I think kind of your thought is, why wouldn't, if somebody did struggle with him and then ultimately shot him with his service weapon, why didn't they try to hide it or something like that? But it's also possible he was shot by somebody who was already armed, potentially.
Yeah. My thought was like, if they're, if they are tussling and there's some sort of evidence on those pieces, that would perhaps try and get rid of them. But yeah, I mean, it could have happened so fast that they didn't even have a chance to.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, they probably, if, there was this exchange that happened, they want to get out of the area as quickly as possible. Yeah. They're not going to go try to hide all of Joe's stuff after they just killed him.
So George Falenko, who is the head of the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force, was named the lead investigator on this case. And agents from the FBI, ATF, and the U.S. Marshal Service all joined the investigation. And after the news about Joe broke, the community definitely went into a state of mourning because Joe, like we said, was a beloved cop, and his death was just unimaginable for many people. He was the first Fox Lake cop to be killed in the line of duty, and it was truly a tragic loss for the community. The Illinois governor ordered all the flags in the state to be lowered to half-mast in honor of Joe, and people from all over the country sent their prayers and condolences to the family and community of Fox Lake. And the Chicago Bears even dedicated a preseason game to G.I. Joe. And even though whoever did this was still on the loose, the public still wanted to have a vigil for Joe the next day, and about 1,200 people showed up for this vigil.
I was watching this one clip, and it's of the mayor. His name was Donnie Schmidt, and he spoke and said, quote, "When they cut him, he bled blue," which I feel like just encapsulates what a
dedicated
that's a good word
member,
for it.
yeah,
Exactly.
police department he was.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was like the hero there. I mean,
Yeah. And everyone just felt so, heartbroken for all his kids and his wife who were just devastated and just never really thought that this could happen to Joe. It seemed like many members of the community were totally shocked that him of all people would have been killed.
Right. For such a experienced officer to end up in that situation in the first place. Like, I think there is definitely some thoughts going on of like, why would he pursue three suspects? Like, a lot of times you got to kind of calculate like
The risk.
If you go after 3 people, you're outnumbered for one, and you're in an area where it's going to be difficult to find you, and help is going to be farther away. An experienced officer, I feel like, would potentially hang back.
That's kind of what people seem to be
for
thinking.
backup.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that's kind of interesting is that Fox Lake had a service member, had a police officer be killed in the line of duty ever.
Yeah.
And Joe was the first one. Like,
Yeah.
it's just such a shock to everybody that out of everybody that, I mean, if you look at statistics of fallen officers, a lot of times it ends up being officers that are newer to the job. Like, if you look at, which is just unfortunate because it's your lack of experience there, and a lot of situations could put you in harm's way. And so I think everybody's like, especially his coworkers or colleagues, are like,
What?
how?
Yeah.
Joe? Like,
Yeah.
G.I. Joe, literally the guy who's been, on all these tours and military experience, like he's the first one to go. Like, it just didn't make sense.
We are so excited to have Masterclass as a sponsor of today's episode. I personally think Masterclass is one of the coolest concepts because you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. For example, you can learn how to write an amazing song from none other than John Legend himself. You can learn the power of personal branding with Kris Jenner, or how to use your voice as an instrument with Mariah Carey. They have some of the biggest names teaching these classes, you guys, and it makes it so much more enjoyable. And with over 180 classes and a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. I recently checked out a makeup class with Sir John, and I was blown away by the depth of knowledge and quality of the experience. And what was really cool about that class is he wasn't only teaching you about makeup, he also helped me build my skincare routine. And he goes over 3 of his most sought after looks: the no makeup look, the everyday look, and the icon look. And it's so convenient because it's not necessary to sit down and consume a full class start to finish. You can work at your own pace and even take it 10 minutes at a time if you need to. I highly recommend that you check it out. It's such an enjoyable experience. And this holiday, you can give 1 annual membership and get 1 for free. Just go to masterclass.com/milehigher today. That's masterclass.com/milehigher. And meanwhile, they're still looking for these guys who apparently killed him. And they weren't having any luck. None of the 3 suspects were turning up. And it would be hard for police to find the suspects if they were hiding out, because Fox Lake is part of the Northeast Illinois Chain o' Lakes region. And it's a popular weekend destination for people in Chicago and Milwaukee. And at the time, the population of Fox Lake was only about 10,000 people. So lots of people have weekend or summer homes in that area. And everyone is big on boats there, locals included. So that means there were a lot of vacant homes and boats covered with tarps in that area. And these would be prime places for suspects to hide out, kind of like the Boston bomber.
Right.
And it would be difficult for police to search all of those areas. So authorities were scratching their heads trying to find these guys. That is until police got a call from a 30-year-old woman named Kristen Kiefer. And she was a resident of the Chicago suburb, Vernon Hills. Kristen was driving down Route 12 through the town of Volo on the night of the 2nd, 1 day after Joe's murder. For context, Volo is just south of Fox Lake. And around 9:30 p.m., Kristen called the police and told them a terrifying story. She claimed that she had been having car trouble, so she pulled off on the side of Route 12. But when she pulled over, she spotted 2 men, a white man and a black man, in a cornfield, walking towards her. Kristen told the dispatcher that the 2 men approached her and tried to steal her car. Then, when she told the suspects she would call the police, they ran away into the cornfield. The police immediately rushed to the scene and set up a perimeter around the area, and they believed that the two men were suspects in Joe's murder. So, of course, they threw a ton of resources into this search. Almost 100 police officers, 11 search dogs, and 3 air units. And they searched for these suspects for 5 hours, but they found nothing. And it turns out Kristen's story was a complete lie. She admitted to police that she made the whole thing up to get attention from the family that she nannied for.
What?
Yeah, isn't that great?
Oh my God.
So now the investigation was back to square one.
What is wrong with people that they send police on wild goose chases? Dude. The other thing I want to mention too is that like prior to this, they had so many resources there that they had what they call a kill zone set up around Fox Lake. Like they literally had the entire community surrounded. So the difficulty for these 3 individuals to escape is that the chances would be very, very slim because they literally had this thing surrounded. And I mean, the response was just a whole nother level. I mean, there's so many resources put into this.
At one point, there was another lead that seemed promising. FBI Quantico believed that they had found 3 suspects on various cameras. However, once the men were identified, all 3 of them had strong alibis. They discovered that they were on video at an ATM withdrawing money to go to a restaurant and get breakfast. They also did a full lineup with the waitress, and she identified all 3 men. They also had a credit card receipt from breakfast. So what investigators thought could be a huge lead ended up being nothing once again. On September 4th, a $50,000 reward was posted for anyone who could give investigators information that would lead to an arrest and conviction of Joe's killers. And Joe became a nationally recognized hero, and his funeral definitely reflected just how much people wanted to show their support for Joe, his family, and police officers everywhere.
So then on September 7th, Joe was given a televised funeral with full military honors at his former high school in Antioch. The funeral procession was an 18-mile-long line of police vehicles. There were even 6 or 7 helicopters and even a plane that flew in formation over the funeral. The former Illinois governor, Bruce Rauner, and other notable public officials came to express their condolences. Police officers from all over the country showed up to pay their respects at the funeral, flying in all the way from places like Detroit, New York, and even Las Vegas. Over 5,000 people showed up for the memorial that day. Those who weren't at the massive funeral lined the streets to honor Joe's memory. Some local residents even lined up their boats on the lake while the procession went by. Obviously, this was an incredible amount of support. It was one fit for a brave, dedicated man like Joe. We've got a clip of Joe's family and colleagues actually speaking at his funeral.
He was the kind of man that in the face of danger would run towards it while others ran away. His dedication was unshakable, and his course was unwavering.
Joe and Mel have been in my family and the village of Fox Lake since 1985. They're our family. Today, you're the nation's family.
When we were growing up, we all knew Joe was a hero. But now the nation knows he's a hero.
Tons of people held American flags, thin blue line flags, and signs expressing their gratitude for Joe. And a ton of people held signs that had pro-police messaging, like Blue Lives Matter, Police Lives Matter, and Back the Blue. People started to blame Joe's death on the Black Lives Matter movement. The War on Cops line was really big for media pundits at the time, and they wasted no time in citing Joe's death as evidence of this. When talking about Joe, they also usually pointed out to the August 28th shooting of Darren Goforth, which was a deputy in Houston. People across the nation were concerned that Joe's death was another tragic piece of evidence that there was an all-out war on cops that would only get worse. One Fox News commentator tweeted, "Tell me again it is an open season on cops. Hashtag Blue Lives Matter, hashtag All Lives Matter." Joe's wife, Melody, herself went on Crime Watch Daily and actually accused President Barack Obama of ignoring her husband's murder. She also implied that Joe's death was connected to the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's why Obama was staying silent and didn't reach out to the family.
But of course, at this point, they had no evidence of that. I mean, there was nothing backing that up.
No, well, they haven't even found who actually killed Joe yet.
Yeah.
So it's just baseless accusations at this point. But by the time 2015 ended, the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting release showed that it was actually the second safest year to be a cop in decades. But anyway, that's just the facts. But about a week after Joe's death, on September 9th, the coroner, Thomas Rudd, reported that Joe died from a single fatal gunshot wound to the torso. At that time, though, he couldn't determine whether or not Joe died by accident, homicide, or suicide. But he was leaning towards homicide. Still, the coroner couldn't piece together how anyone could have gotten close enough to Joe to kill him. Joe was a fit Army man who was trained to kill, and he probably would have taken someone down with him. In the coroner's words, Joe's going to rip out the guy's eyes or his throat. The coroner's comments made the lead investigator and other cops very angry. They publicly bashed him for releasing those details about Joe's death, and they said his actions were inappropriate and completely unprofessional. When the autopsy was conducted, it also showed that Joe was shot twice. The first shot hit Joe's right chest, but the bullet was stopped by his bulletproof vest and cell phone. The second shot, though, was fatal. It hit Joe's left chest 2 inches under the upper collar of his bulletproof vest. And this shot was fired from above the vest in a downward direction. At the time, the coroner wasn't saying it publicly, but this was why he had hang-ups about immediately labeling Joe's death a homicide. He knew that there were a lot of emotions at play in the situation, and the task force was really pushing the widely held belief that Joe was murdered. But the fatal shot really baffled the county coroner. He didn't know how a suspect could have gotten close enough to shoot a trained cop, especially someone like G.I. Joe. Plus, Joe had no defensive wounds on him. He only had the scratches and bruising to his face, and his uniform was oddly clean and tidy, which is very rare in situations when officers have to, get physical with somebody or there's a struggle of some sort. I mean, those uniforms come untucked so quick. And I mean, I've worn bulletproof vests before, and just having that heavy plate on you, like if you start moving around, it's going to start pulling your shirt out from underneath your belt. So it was really strange that Joe looked as good as he did when it comes to his uniform. The fact it was so clean and tucked in still, if he had actually just been through the fight of his life. There was also just a little bit of mud on his knees. Then on September 11th, a former Chicago police officer called up the coroner's office using *67, which, as we all know, blocks out the caller ID, and he threatened to harm Thomas, George, and other members of the task force unless Thomas officially declared Joe's death a suicide. The police investigated and traced the number back to a retired Chicago cop named Joseph Battaglia. He was arrested and charged the next day. The coroner was saying that he needed more information from law enforcement in order to officially determine Joe's cause of death. Meanwhile, the police were saying that they were waiting on details from the coroner. So they were seemingly, just going back and forth. Members of the local community couldn't imagine that Joe would commit suicide. It just didn't make sense. This case clearly looked like a murder. On September 16th, Joe's son Donald said that Joe never once had a single suicidal thought in his life. He and his family were upset and hurt by the suicide rumors, and they thought they were jeopardizing the investigation. The public was angry and skeptical when the rumors of suicide started flying, and Joe's widow, Melody, said that she believed wholeheartedly that Joe was murdered in the line of duty. She said, "Somebody that is going to kill themselves is not going to shoot themselves twice."
I was watching this interview with Joe's son, DJ, and he talks about how his dad was recently applying for several different police chief positions at different departments, and, argued that if someone was going to be taking their life, that why would they do this and still try to plan their future at the same time?
Right, because most of the times that just wouldn't make sense. But again, I mean, not in every situation where somebody commits suicide does that happen where,
well, circumstances change.
They're depressed and not, planning their future at all. So, but yeah, it is definitely kind of weird. But the coroner hadn't been able to conclude a manner of death at this point. And that was creating some serious tension between his office and George Filenko's task force. The task force stated that they were going to continue investigating Joe's death as a homicide. However, George admitted that the investigators couldn't put suicide or accident off of the table until forensic tests came back and ruled those possibilities out. On September 21st, the police got back results from ballistics and gun residue tests, but they announced that these results didn't rule out or support any of the 3 causes of death that were possible. On October 1st, the investigators announced that Joe had been shot twice with his own weapon, and there were signs of a struggle at the scene.
But privately, CSI investigators and even Fox Lake police officers had doubts about the scene because something just didn't look right from the start. Hundreds of people were questioned, detained, and even arrested in connection to this case, but none of them were found to have any connection to the case at all. Tons of people donated money to cover expenses for the family. They've received over $500,000 in donations that went into over 20 different accounts. And police agencies from the Chicago suburbs spent over $300,000 investigating Joe's death, and over $196,000 of that went towards overtime pay. Some officers were even given overtime pay to attend Joe's funeral. And since the funeral happened on Labor Day, some officers were paid double since they were working on a holiday. And taxpayers in those 50 suburbs would be footing the bill for the investigation. One official said that public safety is expensive and there's no substitute for it. So it was worth it for all the taxpayers to pay to keep their communities safe. I am so excited about our next sponsor because I truly think this is one of the most unique services out there right now. Let me tell you about Storyworth. If you're going to be spending time with loved ones for the holidays, chances are you're going to hear a lot of stories. The ones you love to hear and the ones you've heard many times. But have you ever wanted to help your loved ones document those timeless stories? It can be challenging to write an entire book of life memories, but with Storyworth, it makes it fun and easy. And this is how anyone can write a book about their life. Every week, Storyworth will email your loved one with a single life-related question that you pick from their collection, such as, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? Or what's the furthest you've traveled? And all they have to do is reply with a story. Then after a year, Storyworth compiles your loved one's stories, memories, or even photos into a hardcover book, creating a valued keepsake. I just think this is the coolest thing, and I really wish that I would have known about this when my grandparents were still alive, because there's so many memories and stories that I have with them, them telling me things over the years that I wish I had written down because it's hard to remember all the details. I really think it would be something that you would cherish in your family for generations. Millions of stories have already been told with Storyworth because they make the process so simple. So get started and help your family share their story this holiday season with Storyworth. Go to storyworth.com/milehigher today and save $10 on your first purchase. That's Storyworth, STORYWORTH.com/milehigher to save $10 on your first purchase. Storyworth.com/milehigher. So that brings us to November 4th, about 2 months after Joe died. Investigators called a press conference with the findings of their investigation. And this was the bombshell that they dropped. Let's take a look.
We're here this morning to wrap up the investigation into the death of Lieutenant Charles Joseph Gliniewicz. This extensive investigation has concluded with an overwhelming amount of evidence that Gliniewicz' death was a carefully staged suicide. We have determined this staged suicide was the end result of extensive criminal acts that Gliniewicz had been committing. There are no winners here. Gliniewicz committed the ultimate betrayal to the citizens he served and the entire law enforcement community. The facts of his actions prove he behaved for years in a manner completely contrary to the image he portrayed.
I agree with the findings that this was a carefully staged suicide.
So obviously that was totally shocking to most members of the community.
If you watch the rest of this press conference, like people are like yelling, there's, all the reporters are asking a million questions, and it's a major shock.
It was. And it turns out that Joe Gliniewicz was definitely not the hero cop that he was portrayed to be. And as we said before, everyone in the community loved Joe. Well, it turns out that that is not exactly true, because Joe had indeed pissed off a lot of people and they disliked him for very good reason. And as for being an honest, hardworking cop with outstanding character, that wasn't true either. It turns out Joe was a crooked cop. And the list of his offenses is long, you guys. I mean, this was totally shocking. Yeah, Joe had sexual harassment complaints filed against him in 2000 by one of his subordinates, a woman named Denise Sharp Gertz. Denise said that Joe made lewd comments towards her, coerced her into performing sexual acts on 5 occasions, and he urinated in front of her. Joe pressured Denise into these acts by making indications that she needed to perform these sexual favors in order to keep her job. Denise pleaded with Joe that she wanted the sexual harassment to stop, but Joe continued to strongly suggest that Denise needed to perform these sexual favors in order to keep her job and move up the ranks. Denise reported Joe in 2000, and the police chief at the time, a man named Edward Garriston, suspended Joe for 30 days and ordered him to attend a treatment for sex addiction. From there, he returned to the force. Denise quit the Fox Lake Police Department in 2001, and she said not only was she a victim of Joe's sexual harassment, but the department continually discriminated against her on the basis of her gender. She filed a lawsuit against the police department, but it was dismissed. And in 2009, Joe's behavior had gotten so bad that 11 officers with the Fox Lake Police Department wrote an anonymous letter to the town's mayor. And Joe's behavior had gone unpunished for so long that it was starting to really lower the morale of the whole department, and they wanted Joe fired outright. And this really says a lot when you consider the whole blue wall of silence. This basically is a big unspoken rule that Josh kind of mentioned earlier in policing, that cops don't rat on other cops. And if an officer sees another officer doing something unethical, illegal, or against procedure, they're supposed to keep their mouths shut.
Which I just want to say, to clarify, this is the absolute opposite is taught to you during academy. Like you are literally, like, we went through this even in the Explorer Academy. Like if you ever see somebody, wearing a uniform, or you're on a ride along with an officer and something happens that you feel uncomfortable with, or you feel like is illegal in some way, like you are supposed to report that to their superior. Like that's what they at least say. But what actually happens is,
there's like an unspoken rule on top of that between.
There's definitely like a brotherhood going on. And I mean, in not all cases do things go, behind this blue wall of silence. Sometimes things, it gets handled accordingly, but a lot of times, especially what I've seen is like in smaller departments, it's a lot easier because a lot of times these guys have a lot of history with each other. They've been in the department for 30 years. I mean, you're talking, there's a seniority sort of thing within police departments where the longer you're in it, the more untouchable you are, sort of thing. So Joe was in there a long time, and so what are you going to go after, the top dog, so to speak? And
because whistleblower cops are, who actually speak up, are often punished by other officers.
Right.
So if these cops cross the thin blue line, they are often shunned and harassed. And they also risk things like losing their pension, losing their benefits, and being forced into retirement. So the threat of retaliation is very real in these situations. The 11 officers that brought up the sexual harassment complaint from Denise also revealed that Joe had been sexually harassing a dispatcher. There were also multiple instances where Joe was allegedly groping women's breasts at the department Christmas parties. The officers also wrote that the bouncers at local bars repeatedly complained about Joe's excessive drunkenness and belligerency. Other bouncers talked to Fox Lake officers and said that Joe would drink in the bars after hours and refuse to leave. Other cops would see Joe in the bars eating pizza and drinking while he was still on duty.
That's
Excellent.
a big no-no.
They also saw him hanging out in places around the village with women who definitely were not his wife,
So
Melody.
basically exploiting his power that he has.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he also let some of the kids in the Explorers program have unsupervised access to the police department. He even gave them a chance to wear clothes labeled as police and let them drive police vehicles.
Which is is super dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean,
what the fuck?
Why would you want to give kids who aren't actually police officers clothing that says police? Because guess what? You go out into, like, even just wearing a police explorer uniform, I would go out with officers on ride-alongs. I'd go into 7-Eleven and, like, I would be treated just like a cop. Like, they'd give me the police officer 7-Eleven special for free.
Really?
Yeah. Like, they give you, like, soda and, like, a hot dog or something like that.
But yours said Explorer.
Yeah, but most people don't understand what Explorer means. So so to the public, what I looked like was an officer in training. So I'd go to a call, I'd go to a domestic disturbance, and I'd be standing there next to the officer,
Right.
facing these people in the middle of a crisis, and they'd be looking at I would just be standing there like listening and watching. Wow. But people don't, a lot of people don't know, have ever heard of explorers before, like police explorer. Yeah. That seems like somebody who's actually trained to be a cop. So it's very dangerous to give them police, official police attire to wear, because people are going to believe that that's a real police officer.
And why would you do that? Why would you take such a risk like that? Like, what's in it for Joe at that point? I guess to feel like the cool guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a power thing.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure his Explorer post was lit, man. I'm sure people loved his stuff because he was doing all kinds of cool stuff.
A lot of them talked about how much they love Joe and how much they love the program and everything. But anyway, the list of issues with this guy goes on. Joe was also letting friends fill up their cars from village-owned gas pumps.
Which, so like a lot of cities, they have gas pumps for all the city vehicles. So he was letting his friends like go in through an unauthorized area to get gas from the city. Yeah.
Once he ran up a $300 tab at a Fox Lake tavern and then skipped out on the bill. Gotta love it. He also took his family on a road trip to Wisconsin in a squad car.
Which I bet you anything, this dude probably was like
speeding.
Oh yeah,
taking on
whoop, turn on the lights and go through stoplights and stuff. Like
that's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Side note, I see that all the time. Is that legal? Can you just do that as the cop?
If they're on their way to a call, yes, but otherwise, if you're not going to a call, no, you have to abide by all the rules of the road.
And obviously, people take advantage of that.
I was gonna say, I see quite often, like they'll turn on their lights
just to go through the intersection
or something or whatever, and then turn them off, and then just drive it. Like it doesn't seem as though they're urgent to get anywhere. I've always wondered, is that just a fun little perk you have?
Well,
it's not supposed to be, but yes, they do. A lot of them do that.
I mean, just because they're driving, because you only can speed as an officer if you're going to a code 3 call. Like if you're going to a call, it's like code 3, which means there's imminent danger. There's something very serious going on. Yeah. Where you go, that means you go lights and sirens. So you're blazing, going fast, which is a lot of fun, by the way. But otherwise, if you're going to any other type of call, you're supposed to stay within the speed limit. Like, and yes, you could probably get away with like going through an intersection like that and not get in trouble for that. But yeah, you definitely got to abide by the rules as an officer. You can't just like do whatever the hell you want. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package theft spike nationally? That's why our friends at Simply Safe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your Simply Safe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and a greater peace of mind this holiday season. There's so many things I love about Simply Safe. Number 1, they don't lock you into a horrible contract. 2, you can set up the system by yourself. And 3, you can customize their system for whatever size of home you have. You can even put it in an apartment if you want to. They also have video doorbells. They also have outdoor and indoor cameras, which I absolutely love. And their app is probably the most intuitive app that I've ever used. So when an emergency happens, professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology, which is exclusive from Simply Safe, to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real so that they can get faster police dispatch. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside. There's smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and they even have hazard sensors to detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Best of all, 24/7 professional monitoring service costs under $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system, which, boo, they suck. With top-rated Simply Safe app, staying in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. It's truly amazing. Don't miss your chance for massive savings on my favorite security system gift. Get 50% off any new system at simplysafe.com/milehigher today. This is their biggest discount of the year, folks, so take advantage. That's simplysafe.com/milehigher. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
So the officers tried bringing the complaints to the department chief, Michael Bayan, but felt like he wasn't really doing anything about it. They wrote, "We can no longer stand by and watch Lieutenant Gliniewicz violate the rules and regulations, policies and procedures, and state statute, and remain silent."
You are a law enforcement officer. Yeah. You are to abide by the laws yourself as well as enforce the laws.
Personnel files from the department showed even more violations beginning early in his career. Joe received multiple suspensions during his career, it turns out. One night in 1988, around 1 a.m., a Lake County Sheriff's deputy found Joe passed out in the driver's seat of his truck. Joe's foot was on the gas and the engine was running full throttle. That night, Joe had drank 6 beers and had multiple shots. The deputy took him home and had the truck towed.
That's a major,
I'll say.
Major failure there on the deputy's part. You're absolutely supposed to be arresting him for probably DUI or DWI at that point.
Want to rat out your fellow officer, though. Joe reported that the truck was stolen the next day because he didn't remember what happened to it. No disciplinary action was taken. The report said that this incident was not the first time that something like this happened. And it turned out it wouldn't be the last either, because later that year, Joe called into work drunk. He said that he couldn't make his shift because he had gone up to Wisconsin with his friends and had too much to drink before he was supposed to report for duty. The police chief wrote that Joe had said that he knew he had a drinking problem, but he was doing good. He just couldn't stop himself after one drink. The file also showed that Joe allegedly intimidated an emergency dispatcher back in 2003. He made a comment about putting bullets in her chest and came into the radio room with a shotgun 2 days later. And Joe told a supervisor that he was just making lighthearted comments about the Al Capone era in Fox Lake and that the gun was not loaded.
What on earth?
I know.
That is just so
Insane.
out of line. Oh my God.
Joe was also repeatedly tardy and careless at work. He'd been suspended multiple times for these careless actions, but the behavior just seemed to continue. And that's because all of Joe's behavior seemed to be dealt with by nothing more than a slap on the wrist, if they were even addressed at all, which a lot of times they weren't. At the same time, Joe was receiving plenty of awards and recognition from officials in the federal, state, and local agencies for his work on the Explorers program. From the outside, Joe seemed to be a pillar of the community, but in the truth, he was hiding his unsavory activities from the community. During their investigation, the police recovered Joe's text messages and bank records from the past 6 months, and that revealed even more shocking crimes. He had tried to delete the texts before his death, but obviously that does not mean the FBI can't get a hold of them.
6,500 pages of recovered text.
I'm surprised he didn't even realize that was probably going to happen. Like,
come on, he must have known that. Really?
Well,
he thought he was going to be able to just delete them?
One thing that I think is important to note is that the first shot that he did was basically at his phone. And
convenient.
Yeah, I think he trying to potentially, destroy his phone with that shot? Maybe.
Yeah.
But obviously he didn't do a very good job because they still recovered all the messages.
And these text messages showed that at least 2 other people were directly involved in Joe's crimes. Police wouldn't say who at first, but we later find out that his wife, Melody, and his son, DJ, were involved.
So that leads us to the Explorers Fund, aka the money that's supposed to be used for the youth. Joe was known as the hero leader of the Youth Explorers Post, but it turns out for the past 7 years, Joe had been embezzling tens of thousands of dollars from the Explorer Post funds. Joe spent that stolen money on things like mortgage payments, gym memberships, travel, over 400 meals at restaurants.
400?
Yeah.
Oh my
His
God.
morning coffees at Starbucks.
Dude.
And you're not going to believe this, porn.
Love it.
He was also giving out personal loans from that money to his friends. He was just spending tons of money.
Stealing from children.
Yeah.
Excellent job.
Supposed
here.
to go into, that money's supposed to go into competitions, supposed to go into gear, things like that.
Yeah. It's for them.
Right. Well, Joe took it as like, this is my thing. I think he was like, this is my program. I started this. I'm in charge of it. So I'm going to do this my way.
So I'm going to steal money from the public and from these children.
Yeah.
And spend it on porn.
Right.
I mean,
it's
like mind blowing that this actually happened.
And probably never even thinking that he probably thought this would never even come up, that like eventually he would just retire and, eventually somebody else would take over. It just be sort of buried.
That's insane.
So not only was he spending the money on personal things, but he was also spending huge amounts of money on the Explorers program itself. And like I mentioned at the beginning, he trained these kids way more than necessary. He basically made his own mini militia with these kids. He was also apparently forging signatures from the police chief to sign off on all these transactions, which is definitely a crime. The embezzlement was probably the biggest reason that Joe decided to commit suicide. There was actually an audit of the Explorers program's finances coming up, and Joe was very worried that this audit would reveal all of his criminal activities, because a woman by the name of Ann Marin was appointed as the Fox Lake Village administrator in 2014. And this was actually a new position within the village. And Ann was the first person to hold it. And one of her tasks was to run audits of the village's divisions, which also happened to include the Explorers program. So when Ann Marin looked at the Explorer Fund's finances, certain things just didn't seem to add up. So she started asking questions about how the money in the Explorers post was actually being used. And since Joe was head of the program, she asked him for a full inventory of the money coming in and out of the fund, which is very routine stuff. You're supposed to keep track of all this. But when Joe found out that he was about to be audited, he panicked. He knew that Ann was going to expose his crimes. And in his text to others, Joe clearly knows his goose is about to be cooked. In a text to his son DJ, Joe wrote, quote, "She hates me, hates the Explorer program, and is crawling up my ass. If she gets a hold of the old checking account, I'm pretty well fucked." In another set of texts to DJ, Joe appears pretty desperate to get some money paid back. He'd actually loaned DJ money taken out of the Explorers Fund to fix his truck. Joe told him, "This situation right here would give her the means to crucify me if it were discovered." Joe also told DJ that if he were selected as the new chief of the Antioch Police Department, he'd have to turn the fund over to someone else so he'd be found out. He warned DJ, "You are borrowing from that quote-unquote other account. When you get back, you'll have to start dumping money into that account or you'll be visiting me in jail." So Joe, by this point, had figured, or shortly before the events sort of happened, that he had to figure out a way to sort of make this whole thing go away. But that just didn't end up happening. In late March of 2015, Joe texted someone in Fox Lake about the possibility of moving the Explorers post out of the police department's jurisdiction. Instead, he would have a local Rotary Club or fire department sponsor it, which not even a smart idea, because how are you going to get access to the police department if you're not a part of it? I mean, that would even work. It would be like the Boy Scouts at that point. But his thought was that at this point, the program would be out of Ann's control. He was trying to think of any way to get it out of her control or give her the ability to audit the department. He told that person that Ann was a power monger who wanted to control everything in the village. Joe had apparently talked about this possibility with Chief Michael Bayan. Joe told Melody if he set a retirement date or put in his 2 weeks, the chief would agree to move the program. Joe had discussed the missing funds with both of them. He also discussed crazy plans to have the Ann problem taken care of. In a conversation with an unnamed woman, Joe asked her to set up a meeting with high-ranking members of a motorcycle gang. He planned to put a hit out on Ann and have one of those gang members kill her. The text says, "Close to entertaining a meeting with a mutual acquaintance of ours," with the word White in their nickname, which White is a sort of a code name for a high-ranking gang member. But those plans somehow fell through. In May of 2015, the chief refused to move the post to the local American Legion, so Joe needed a different solution. That month, Joe texted DJ about possible solutions to their problem. DJ suggested setting Ann up to get a DUI. Great idea. Joe responded that he'd consider that as well as a bunch of other possible scenarios. And these are all in the text messages, people. Joe had also admitted that he had thought about planting something on Ann. Now, police actually found a bag of cocaine in Joe's desk during their investigation, and the cocaine wasn't connected to any recorded police seizures, so it may have just been some recreational cocaine that Joe had bought to plant on somebody, or maybe Joe was using himself. But they believed he might have planned to plant that cocaine on Ann and have her arrested. Joe even hinted at disposing of Ann's body in the nearby Volo Bog in a conversation with DJ. But despite Joe's efforts, it looked like the audit was still going to go forward.
So the walls were really starting to close in on him, and Joe needed another way out. He believed the only way to stop the investigation and save him and his family's reputation was to kill himself. But he needed to make it look like a murder instead, so that he would go out like a hero, killed in the line of duty. Joe's crimes would taint the legacy and hero persona that he had built for decades. He would almost certainly be prosecuted for embezzlement, and he would become another instance of a crooked cop protected by the prestige of his badge. It would be a fate worse than death for him. Of course, if he simply killed himself, people would want to know why. So it would be better if he went out as a noble cop. And in that case, his family would be supported by police officers, their families, and their supporters all over the country. They would be well taken care of by the state and the local community, and his family would get hundreds of thousands of dollars in benefits since he was killed on the job. So Joe knew what he had to do. On the morning of August 31st, 2015, the day before Joe died, Ann asked Joe if he had a complete inventory for the Explorer post. Joe says yes, and Ann asked if Joe could give her the inventory at 2 p.m. that day. Again, Joe says yes. At 9:14 a.m. that day, Joe texted Chief Bayan and wrote, "She has now demanded a complete inventory of the Explorer Central and a financial report, FML." Less than 24 hours later, Joe was dead.
As you can imagine, the public was shocked at the revelations. Once the nation found out the truth, G.I. Joe became G.I. Joke, the shame of Fox Lake. The lead investigator told reporters that Joe committed the ultimate betrayal. Thousands of people had came out to show support for Joe and his family on the day of his funeral. Locals gave interviews to the news media telling them all about how Joe was an honorable cop. They put blue bulbs in their porch lights to honor his memory and tied blue ribbons on poles. Businesses and homes all over town put his photo on windows and yard signs. The community mourned, but it was all a lie. Everyone had been duped and people were furious. But some of them just couldn't let go of the man they knew as a hero. It was all too unbelievable.
I think when you have an idea of who someone is so strongly, it's just almost impossible to accept that it was all a lie, that they're such a fraud.
Yeah. It's probably like one of the hardest things anyone would have to deal with in life is like you see this person as one way and their actions from what you've seen add up to it. But then the double life thing is just, it's a really hard one, that behind the scenes they're actually this bad guy.
Especially a lot of the kids in this program.
Yeah,
I mean, so many of them said, I still kind of look up to him in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like I'll always have good memories, but you know, obviously his reputation and the image of who he was to them is just tarnished. And
well, especially in this
shocking.
case where you're literally a law enforcement officer and you're literally a criminal behind the scenes. Like that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, especially with how bad everything that he did was, and so much variety of crime here.
Well, I think that really speaks to his character. I mean, when you have multiple, it wasn't just like he was using the Explorer funds incorrectly and is a money issue. It was sexual harassment. It was the way he carried himself, as of, you know, all these other things, his drunkenness and belligerency, like all these different things. It's just crazy. So here's some of the reactions from local officials and townspeople. We have some clips here.
How much did you donate?
It was somewhere between 50 and 100.
Lake County's top investigator not only donated to the family of disgraced cop Lieutenant Joe Gliniewicz, but State's Attorney Mike Neerheim played a key role at his funeral.
I was in the funeral procession, which there had to be 50,000 people from the community that came out and to support the lieutenant's family.
You feel duped?
Yeah, I do. To see that outpouring of support and then to see it shift to what it turned out to be, we're all disappointed.
Among the contributors, Village Administrator Ann Marin. How much did you donate?
I donated $100.
Do you want your money back?
No, I right now that's not even a question on my mind. There are so many other things and other things that we are running around doing.
It seems like he was lying and stealing, so why should people give their hard-earned money to help something that didn't end up being what we thought it was?
Some signs once honoring Lieutenant Joe Gliniewicz now show signs of disgust. Many who live in Fox Lake, who knew him, are grappling with the reality his was not a random death.
It came out as a staged suicide. Really gives me chills and it hurts me.
It's hard to picture him doing that. You know, I wouldn't, you know, it almost seems like it isn't true.
17-year-old Noah Flores was a member of the Explorers program Gliniewicz oversaw. Do you feel betrayed personally?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because he's helped me through numerous circumstances.
Others feel differently.
Been going on for 7 years. I don't understand why the village didn't know about it. At first, I didn't want to believe it.
says ex-police officer Jack Kilchinski, who spent the last month or so organizing this November 6th benefit for Gliniewicz's family, a benefit now canceled. Cash and donated items like socks and Hawks tickets now being returned in light of this new information.
If there was a reason like that, no, there probably shouldn't be a fundraiser. But sometimes people crack.
Definitely seems like a lot of mixed reactions there.
Yeah.
You know, obviously most people are disappointed and upset, angry.
Yeah. But I can see how it'd be hard to accept as well.
It'd be very hard. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, do his mistakes equal, kind of erase all of the good things that he might have done, and all of the people that he may have helped, and the explorers especially were all very close to him. So I can see how it'd be very difficult to know what to feel after all this came out.
Finding high quality and affordable groceries in one place is almost impossible in today's world. But thanks to Thrive Market, I stress less because I get everything I need in one place, plus savings that are guaranteed on every order. Shopping with Thrive Market means you'll find everything you need, from healthy pantry essentials to sustainable meat and seafood, non-toxic cleaning and beauty products, and it's all delivered right to your door. And when you buy from Thrive Market, you can get 30% off the best organic groceries and always get the lowest price because they have a price match guarantee, like Bob's Red Mill, Annie's, Weleda, Hum, Moon Juice, and tons more. And I absolutely love how easy it is to use their website and app. It just makes it all such a more convenient experience. Maybe you're looking for keto items, for example, or gluten-free items. You can actually filter by 90 plus values and lifestyles to find what works for you. And if you're gearing up for all your holiday festivities, Thrive Market is your stress-free solution because you can order from the comfort of your couch and skip the grocery lines and crowded parking lots. To me, that is the best part about it. And their fast and free carbon neutral shipping gets your order to you in no time. I've been stocking up on tons of plant-powered cleaning products because this is the time of year we all want to keep our houses nice and clean for when guests come over. And the best part of all is when you join Thrive Market, you're joining a community of 1 million plus members and sponsoring a family in need. So get convenient, high quality, affordable groceries delivered with Thrive Market. Join Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's Thrive, THRIVE, market.com/mile higher for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. Again, THRIVE, market.com/mile higher.
So as for the police chief, Michael Bayan, it seems like he had definitely let Joe off the hook for his behavior throughout the years. And from the messages, it seems like Michael might have had some sort of knowledge that an audit of the Explorers Fund would be very bad for the department. He obviously knew about the embezzlement. Chief Bayan announced his retirement in August, just a few days before Joe died, and he had already been placed on administrative leave before he announced his retirement. The leave was connected to a village investigation into a Fox Lake officer's handling of a public intoxication arrest, although this officer was not Joe. There were actually 3 men who were arrested on the day of Joe's staged murder, and they ended up filing a class action lawsuit against the Fox Lake Police Department. So many innocent people had been detained and questioned in the investigation, and the lawsuit alleged that the police did this even though they had reason to believe that Joe may not have been murdered. One of the 3 men was just walking along the woods by his house when he was arrested and held for several hours. The second man was leaving his home when police cuffed him. They tried to make him submit to gunshot residue tests and searched his house without a warrant. The third man was arrested and released 10 hours later. 70% of Lake County residents fit the vague description Joe gave, and even Fox Lake police responders noticed that the crime scene was off from the get-go. Plus, the department knew about Joe's previous misdeeds. Again, Joe texted Chief Bayan the day before his death, complaining about the audit and saying, "Fuck my life." Chief Bayan failed to tell investigators about this text immediately after Joe's death, and this could have given them a motive for why this would point to a suicide and not homicide. In the end, the coroner, Thomas Rudd, was vindicated. He believed that Fox Lake investigators knew Joe's death was a suicide from the start, and they were trying to engage in a cover-up. George Filenko, the lead investigator, came under heavy fire for how he handled the case, and he actually resigned 6 months after the investigation ended. Although this was due to the fact that he turned 65, which was mandatory retirement age at his department. Ann Marin continued to serve as the Fox Lake Village manager until 2021. She actually had no idea that Joe hated her so much before the scandal broke. The news that he had been threatening her life came as a complete shock to her, as Joe had never gave her any direct sign that he had issues with her. We actually have a clip of Ann Marin reflecting on this case. Okay.
No one was left unscathed, whether it was in Fox Lake, in the media, in the nation. Every police agency felt the impact of this and felt it terribly. Back in the day, it was declared there was a war on police. And the reason this became so big is everyone wanted to get together to support this officer and police departments around the nation. You know, those 2 months for me were the most stressful of my career. And I will tell you, I was threatened. Social media went ballistic. Terrible things were said about me. I had elected officials and other employees come to me and say they were worried about my safety. Threatening phone calls were, a daily occurrence. And I lived through that for 2 months until the day of vindication. And when that finally came, yes, there was relief. Yes, I got phone calls apologetically saying we are very sorry. 1,000 emails, letters, flowers. People were very supportive, so it turned it around for me. It was a relief. It was a huge relief to me. I think to all the employees, I think to the village officials too, that the truth finally came out.
God, I'm so glad nothing ever happened
I know.
to her.
Can you imagine though? You're just trying to do your job.
Terrible.
And all of a sudden you're like getting death threats because you're being blamed for this officer.
Because he's afraid you might hold him accountable for his own bullshit.
Absolutely insane.
Unreal. So both Melody and DJ Gliniewicz were investigated by police as well. Melody had her bank accounts frozen, which left all that donation money in limbo.
Which was well over $500,000.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money.
A lot. DJ Gliniewicz wasn't charged with anything in connection with the Explorers Fund. The police apparently didn't have enough evidence against him, but get this. Joe actually had an affair with a young woman named Katie Brown back in 2013. Katie Brown actually ended up marrying Joe's son, DJ, that year. Fun family ties there. And the marriage was actually a sham wedding set up by Joe himself so that DJ could get extra military benefits. And he and Katie divorced after a 1.5 years of marriage, and they both denied all the allegations. The Army started its own investigation into the marriage to see if it was fraudulent. Katie Brown had actually been married before to a businessman, and he said that the marriage lasted 3 months, but he believed Katie only married him to take his money and then divorce him. In 2016, Melody Gliniewicz was charged with 11 counts of conspiracy, unlawful use of charitable funds, and money laundering, and it was clear from the text messages that she knew Joe was taking money out of the Explorers Fund. In one message, he informed her, use the Explorer account for the flight, $624.70. But she still pleaded not guilty and maintained her innocence. She was going to take the case to trial and fight the embezzlement charges. Melody was granted access to a personal bank account with over $33,000 in it, and some of that money came from private donations to Melody after her husband's death, and it also contained Joe's final paycheck from the police department. And after her arrest, Melody tried for years to get access to her husband's pension. Many of the people and businesses who donated money to the Gliniewicz Family Fund all asked for their money back. So did many of the people who donated to the Explorers Post. The people who donated to the family fund are probably out of luck. Those donations are considered private gifts, so the donors are not protected like they would be if they donated to an actual charity. So their money may never be returned. The people who donated to the Explorers Post probably won't see that money either. The money is considered a gift too, so the Attorney General gives the money to a different cause that best serves the original charity's mission. The trial was delayed for 6 long years until it was finally set for February of 2022. But that month, Melody pled guilty to 1 felony count of deceptive practice to avoid going to trial. The prosecutor dropped all other charges in exchange for her guilty plea. Also, an appellate court ruled that Melody's texts with Joe were admissible in court, which was the prosecution's smoking gun. So that probably played a part in her decision. She was sentenced to 24 months of probation and 150 hours of community service in April of this year. A judge allowed Melody to be sentenced to the second chance probation program for first-time offenders. That means if she successfully completes the requirements, the conviction will be off of her record. Plus, she might be able to finally access her husband's pension, which has been very controversial. At her sentencing, Melody still maintained her innocence, even after she pled guilty. So let's hear some of her statement at her sentence hearing. You can hear in her own words why she thinks she's innocent and why she's just a victim in all of this.
Didn't know my husband was commingling his own money into the Explorer account until he asked me to write a check back into the account. And I never knew the full amount that he was commingling until after his death. The one and only time I ever personally made a transaction on the Explorer account was at my husband's instructions to purchase an airline ticket to bring our son home for a funeral for a former Explorer program. I'd like to make it clear, I never took a cent from the Explorer fund, no matter what has been recorded. Life since my husband's death and this prosecution has not only affected my life, but those of my children. All of us have been subjected to a litany of death threats. The media not only released our address and our phone number, but for good measure, they released my social security number and my driver's license number. Further, I received notification from my bank that they decided they were going to cancel my credit card because per them, doing business with me was a reputational risk to their company. But they took it further and they shut my savings and checking account down and then turned around and shut the savings accounts and checkings account down of all my children. And as hard as I've tried, and I have filled out more job applications than I can count, I am still unable to obtain employment just because of my name. The worst is probably the continual desecration of my husband's grave. And there have been many times that we arrive and everything is broken and strewn about. Perhaps people will disagree with how my husband managed finances, which is the crux of the matter here. And I will note there is a difference between malice and a lack of skill. But please, let his final resting place be a place to bring peace to his family and loved ones.
Obviously, you can question what she knew and what she didn't know. I mean, how much of the truth is she actually telling? We won't know at the end of the day. But I can't help but feel some sympathy for her. It just seems like a lot of it she didn't know about. And for him to tarnish their whole family's reputation like that, it's sad. I feel bad for her in a way.
Well, it's still her husband, as she said, her best friend.
Yeah,
it's
obviously
her kid's
it's sad
father.
in that way too.
To deal with a loved one taking their own life is in any circumstances is very difficult. And obviously came as a major shock to them as well. It's not like, as far as we know, they had any idea that he was going to do this, though. I don't think there's any evidence to say that they had any idea he was going to kill himself.
No, I mean, at the end, she's really a victim of him as well.
Yeah, he's the one, really to blame in all of the pain that she's now experiencing. I do think it's crossing the line to go and desecrate someone's grave and things like that. I think that's messed up to go and...
It's unnecessary.
Yeah, to go
especially with his kids.
To go and continue to do that, like, that's just painful to the family. They've already lost him for, So why do you need to go about doing that? And... I don't know. It's really tough because it's like,
she obviously did know he was taking from the program.
Yeah, the money thing is like, it's embezzlement. To me, that's like, there's also a possibility that maybe he didn't really understand how the finances worked, or maybe he didn't understand how that money should have been used. There's a possibility that he wasn't, I mean, he's not a finance guy. He just ran
I think
this
he
post.
knew by saying, I mean, how much trouble he knew he was going to get in if they were audited. He knew he wasn't,
Yeah.
I mean, come on. He fucking knew.
I think he was more, I don't even know if it was as much about the money because it's like, he didn't do it. Like he would have gotten in trouble. He may, obviously his reputation as a police officer would have been definitely tarnished after that. But like getting in trouble for embezzlement's not going to end your life, as you know. And like, would it be enough reason to go?
But he knew everything else he did over the years was going to come out.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is I think it ultimately came down to all the text messages that he had.
Yeah.
I think he knew that he was going to be, eventually they were going to investigate him and probably get those text messages and then find out that he was going to put out a hit on the village administrator and just things were going to unravel, not to mention, the people that had brought, maybe he thought the chief was going to go down as well and just would open up all these different things. But
yeah, and for the community who apparently loves him so much to find out that he was driving drunk in his squad car, that he had sexually harassed other people. I mean, there was so many things. There were so many things.
Yeah, they did say his personnel file was super, super thick with both accolades and
he just knew it was going to
stuff.
come out that he
wasn't
was a fraud.
who he portrayed himself as.
Right.
And that's a tough, for him, that would have been it kind of makes sense in his case because he was so much about his image and who he portrayed himself as. And I think that would have been, he obviously couldn't see a life where he isn't that.
Yeah.
And
how much, did his wife actually know? We may never know. She claims she just knew about the plane ticket, which is enough. I don't know. It's a hard situation. I think their whole family is a victim of his as well, though. And I do have some sympathy for them.
Yeah. And just, he makes everybody look bad
Yeah.
at the end of the day. The police department, everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody is worse off because of him.
It's just amazing how much he did over the years and really never thought it was going to catch up to him.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you just keep doing it? It's so stupid. It's just unbelievable.
Well, when you're getting away with stuff,
community,
like,
all these kids, all these people who made donations, it's just such a sad situation all around.
I think he had this overall assumption that like I'm above the law. Like everyone loved him. He was known as like this hero police officer and someone who was so well respected that I think it kind of went to his head and his ego was just so inflated that it
he felt invincible.
He definitely got in over his head. I think he just over time, he rose up the ranks and then he was like this, with the chief at the time. And so that's just a recipe for disaster. And if the chief is turning his head the other way, that's ultimately the person who's going to hold him responsible for these things. Yeah. And if he's not doing it, then he definitely felt like he was sort of invincible. And that's why he was also so angry when this village administrator comes in and is like, I'm going to audit your department. He's like, oh, nobody's ever audited me before. So what the hell? Why are you coming after me? And really it's just a routine thing. It's just, he doesn't, it seems like he just didn't really think through a lot of these things and just was like,
he screwed everyone. He screwed the whole police department pretty much. All these donors, the whole community, his children, his wife, everyone.
Yep.
Almost, had this woman scared for her life. She was getting threats. And it's terrible. It's just terrible what he did.
And just the fact that he, even right before he's going to take his own life, he's already planning and thinking, I'm going to do like one last scam.
Let me trick them all
and try
once
to
more.
and try to fool everybody, including very, very experienced law enforcement professionals that I'm going to stage my own murder.
Yeah, it's so fucked up.
And just like, in order to, just so that my family, I get why he did it, but like,
I'm surprised that he actually thought he was going to get away with it, knowing everything that he does after all the years of military training, all the years in the police force, to think that he was going to be able to pull that off and they wouldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking.
It is shocking. Well, imagine if they never, they weren't able to figure out it was a suicide, that this case could still be like an open case where they're still looking for these 3 suspects. Like, I'm just like surprised that
or what if someone was blamed for it? What if they ended up thinking
or
it
they
was
arrest somebody
some
who did
innocent
into
person?
It. Yeah,
it's
true.
Just the magnitude of that lie is so unbelievable. And this community in Fox Lake is still trying to move on from this scandal. Joe will certainly be remembered, but he'll be remembered not for the man that he pretended to be, but for the man he really was. Definitely want to hear your feedback on this one, folks. We know you're going to have a lot of thoughts and opinions, so please share them below in the comments or tweet us and let us know what you think at Mile Higher Pod. Is it pod or podcast?
It is pod, yeah.
Pod,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. There's a lot of handles out there. I get confused. But thanks for joining us today. This was a very interesting one.
Yeah,
I've
never come across a case like this before.
No.
Especially involving a police officer staging his own murder like this.
Pretty wild.
It is. But yeah, we'll wrap up today's episode there. Make sure you follow us on Spotify. It's a really easy and free way to support the show.
Mm-hmm.
Also, check out the Black Friday sale, milehighmerch.com. We will see you guys next time. Until then, keep taking your mind
a mile
higher.